Metaphor Refantazio honestly are some of my favorite characters Atlus has ever made, so let's make a tier list and rank them. These are just based on my own personal preferences, what characters are my favorite for any number of reasons. Story, aesthetics, a combination alongside the gameplay, it's my personal list. So let's get the crappers out the way immediately, like frame one, let's just get them done and out the way so we don't need to talk about characters no one really particularly cares about. Going straight to the Halo 5 tier, our lowest of the low, just all the characters, pretty much most of the candidates, I think they're absolutely fine by themselves. They just don't do anything for me, nor do they move the needle. Same thing with like most of the church people, but like I'm going to put them in C tier because at least there were some interesting things involving these characters in regards to the overall story. They didn't move the needle, they didn't do much for me, but they're like serviceable. I wouldn't say there's a character in Metaphor Refantazio that I personally dislike. It's just there's some characters I enjoy way more than others. Let's get the antagonist from like Arc 2 out the way as well. I'm gonna put this guy in rank Halo 5. I'm gonna put him right there. Morris being one of the big antagonists for the sewer dungeon. He's serviceable, right? It's just, in the grand scheme of Metaphor Refantazio, for me, he's largely forgettable because all the other characters largely just shine way more than him. However, I will put Joanna, you know, the person who was feeding all the babies to the giant human monster. I'm gonna put her in B tier. It's like a low B for me. It's like borderline, basically straddling C tier. But of the characters so far, she has some really good scenes, and I really like how they ended her arc. By the way, spoilers for this video in case no one read the beginning. I like the fact that she died in the way that she did. It furthered the church's storyline overall and was a good conclusion finale for this tragic character that also brought plenty of tragedy herself. Now, we are left with mostly characters that I care about. I'm just gonna put this dude in Halo 5 because I forgot about him, which just kind of works for the character overall. We move on though. Okay. So, let's talk about Nia from Xenoblade. I quite like her as a character overall. I do wish there was more for her. When it comes to Katharina, she's just kind of fun. And I like how they worked in her whole shtick about burning it all down, right? But she was also such a unique character just in terms of how you interacted with her. Running into her as you traveled from point A to point B in the runner. And then it morphed into a more traditional follower story. I quite like this character and the way she was implemented in the main story, and then the reason she's not higher for me is I do kind of wish she still had a presence in the main story going forward after a certain point, but she just kind of doesn't. She's like fine by herself, don't get me wrong, it's just I feel like they could have done a little bit more with this character. I really want to put the two elders from the Elder Village in B, but they are like a tier below those characters for me. I'm gonna put them at like a high C though. I think they suffer a little bit from the pacing of the end of the game, which I still enjoy overall. It's just, it's a section like that Elder Sanctum where these characters specifically don't get that much light or that much attention, and the focus is on the prince and focused on Will, and as it kind of should be because they are the main character of the game, and it is a massive climactic moment for their character and their development going forward. Look, I have to put my GOAT into at least B tier. We have to put, oh, it's Clingy in B at minimum, just based on his voice actor. That man was too on point early in the game. He brought a bunch of character and charm to one of the most important sections of any game, the beginning. He was a great antagonist for the beginning part, really catapulted Stroll into a lovable and likable character, and really furthered his character arc and development early on when it was needed the most, to give Will, who's not going to talk that much throughout the game, at least a main buddy to, you know, bounce off of. Not in that way. He's just a great antagonist because of how he worked early in the game for me. He's also just a ton of fun, and I think sometimes when it comes to like comparing various characters and all that, we just ignore how fun a character can be, and I quite enjoyed Captain Clingy. Actually it's Klinger. Oh, it's Clingy. Alright, we have Yufa's brother who is like serviceable. He doesn't really move the needle for me. I like him more than the characters in C tier. He's a fine character, it's just, you know what I mean? He's okay. Denny, Ed, and Eddie, doesn't move the needle for me. He works fine in the arc that he's in. He's not a character that is particularly memorable for me, mainly because of lack of screen time, and they give all the time we would have had for Denny, and they give it to Yufa, which I think was the right decision because Yufa is the main party member. It's just, he's fine. I'd put him in like a low B. And by the way, the specific placings here in the tier list, don't read too much into them, but let's bang out some of the followers. Because for me, there's not a single follower in this game that I disliked. I quite liked all of them. I think Bawden is fine, but he's probably the weakest follower for me. But, like, that's still B tier. That's fine. B is good for me. C is alright. Ordinarily, Halo 5 tier for me is for bad characters. There's not really any character in this game I would label as bad, so for me, they're just mostly forgettable. So I put Bawden in B tier. He's fine. He's likable. His follower story is okay at best. I am a big fan of Brigitte. Really big fan. She's going to be the first A-tier character for the video. I love to follow her story. I love the twists and turns. I loved everything about that character. She, to me, is one of the best examples of insert follower character here and making it work. Speaking of, the best example of a follower, in my opinion, in all of Metaphor Refantazio is our boy Alonso. Loved his story, start to finish. Loved everything about it. He gives you really good archetypes, which isn't a requirement for me. It's just, you not only have a great aesthetic, but you also have an incredible storyline that got weirdly sad, and some people will call the ending a bait and switch. Fine, you're completely allowed to have your opinion. And yeah, I do think it would have probably landed a bit more if he had died, but it lends itself to the overall trickster idea he has going on, because his greatest, grandest trick of them all, his greatest facade, was tricking you, the player. He reminds me of one of my other favorite characters, but from TV, Neil Caffrey, if you're familiar with White Collar. So I have a fondness for Alonso as a character. It is a crime against humanity, though, that we never saw his very small and cute form like we did with Juna. That is a crime. Borderline should knock him down to A tier just for that. And I'm going to do it for the next, 5 seconds just to make myself feel better. I'm going to put him back in S tier. He's one of my favorite characters. He's memorable. In terms of all of Atlus games, he has one of my favorites. Social link, follower, confidant stories. He's one of my favorites. Alright, the bald monk guy. They did more with him than I thought they would. I quite liked where this character ended up, being in charge of the church and helping you out as the player. And he essentially became a washing machine from P5 to where we would give him a bunch of broken gear and he would just churn out decent gear for us. I can appreciate that. If we didn't get that ending with him, he would have probably been in C tier, because up to that point he was just kind of the muscle for the church and we didn't really get to see him do much on screen. I liked him by the end though. Low B for me. Alright, let's get the emo edgelords out the way right now. Just all the people that listed on My Chemical Romance religiously, and not in a good way. We're gonna knock them in low B. I could not tell you for the life of me the guy on the right's name here. I could not tell you. Zorba, though, would have been forgettable, but I quite liked how he was essentially so obsessed with Luis, and how they brought him back to be this threat, to be this antagonist. He never particularly felt threatening to me, but in serving as this, henchman villain for Luis, I thought he was serviceable, and I loved the body horror stuff that was going on with him throughout the game. Really cool guy. I liked him more than I thought I would. Liddell would have been in C tier if it wasn't for the Juna Awakening scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the entire game. I love that entire arc. I think Liddell's a great reason that arc was so well loved for me. He really pushed along Juna's character arc in that moment, and because of that, I'm gonna put him in B tier instead of C tier. I want to put Fabian in S, but I can't in good conscience do that, because they, in my opinion, of all the characters in this game, they underutilized her arguably the most, and they put all the time and energy into Maria as a character, and that's fine. Don't get me wrong, Maria's a great character, as will be reflected in her ranking later on. It's just, with Fabienne, how do you underutilize that character? Like, if I had no experience with Metaphor Refantazio, and I just looked at all of these characters, and I was trying to select who would be the fan favorite character, it would have been Fabienne. And they just didn't do all that much with her after the whole Grius arc. I really wish they had more with her. I wish she had her own follower. I don't want it to replace anyone else. I just wish we had her as an additional follower story. Or just something with her, please. Speaking of Grius, though, I really liked what they did with this character, and while B tier is starting to become hefty here, I'm gonna put Grius in high B tier. They do kill him off early, and he does have, like, as many death flags as humanly possible for a character. And his grand strategy of just running at Luis and going for the throat, I can respect it. It was also kind of stupid, but it almost worked, right? Like, I liked Grius as a character as that old, wizened, grizzled war hero teacher role of a character that we see in like every piece of fiction ever. He's a decent example of doing that type of character and doing it well. I like that he was a party member for the very beginning of the game. He helps motivate us along. He raises the stakes. He's a good character overall. Looks awesome as well. Great design on him. Okay, let's get the king out of the way. I'm going to put the king really, really high B tier. I swear to God, we're not gonna have too many B tiers for the rest of this video. I promise you. It's just, look, right now we're trying to get through, like, the grunt work. King Hythlodaeus is a good character, and I ended up liking him more than I thought I would, which is a common theme for me for a lot of these characters in Metaphor Refantazio, because not only is he really cool as the giant Majora Mask moon overlooking the entirety of the game, that man has aura as that, but later on, near the end of the game, when he's talking to Luis, and we see him, like, observing Will, who I call J Makoto, and I will call J Makoto for the rest of this video, we saw him watching his journey throughout the rest of the game, looking on as a proud father. I like him as a character. Now, let's get his other half out of the way. Moore, A tier. Moore is a great character for numerous reasons, in my opinion. He's always a pleasure to have on screen, and he's never really particularly annoying, but it's his story that throughout all of Metaphor Refantazio, I would sometimes forget was like this thread in the background waiting to be pulled, but when they started to pull and unravel that storyline, it became super interesting. It all led to that giant climactic battle near the end of the game after we were just getting our butt handed to us by Luis, and we have that giant climactic moment with Moore. I really liked how they handled that scene. Moore almost pleading, like, desperately for us to, like, go over to his side and his way of thinking, and us refusing to do so. He wasn't overused, and I don't think he was underutilized. He is perfectly suitable for A tier, in my opinion. Another character that I wasn't going to think at any point throughout this game would be an A tier, Batlin. I'm a Batlin fanatic, as I've talked about before. I love Batlin as a character. How do you take a character that, for like any other story or any other game or any other piece of media, would just be this throwaway crier character meant to be a mouthpiece for the church, and at some point he would just tuck in his tail and run away? Like, that would be his fate and his story for like any other story out there, but not here. And he has this genuinely good little mini arc when we go to Virga Island and we meet him and we talk to him more until he genuinely comes to our side and our way of thinking and becomes a faithful supporter for the prince. It's a phenomenal arc, in my opinion. And I think Batlin's voice actor, like the voice acting for like most of the characters in this game, uplifts this character because of the emotion they're able to instill in the scene. And it goes to like one of Metaphor Refantazio's weakest points is the lack of voice acting for a lot of the game, and I think people feel that a lot because the voice acting when it's there is so dang good and adds so much more emotion to the scene and to these characters. I'm talking about the English VO here. So yeah, Batlin's great. If we had a little bit more with him, we would have probably been an S tier. And again, he's one of those characters like Fabienne, where in a different way, I really wish we had a follower story for him, just because I wish we were able to hang out more with him one-on-one as a character. Let's talk about Forden. He's fine. I'm going to put him at like the lowest A, though like on any other day, he would probably be like high B for me. But like in terms of what he does for the story, what he does for the story of Judah and Rella, and the whole church arc and everything going on there, he is a good example of the church is bad trope we see in all kinds of JRPGs. I liked him. He's fine. He's not my favorite antagonist in the game, we'll get to him, but I think he's more than serviceable. And when the game wanted you to hate this character, I think they did an effective job at making me at least hate this character in all the right ways. Now, a character that I just can't hate, it's Rella, and I'm going to put her in A tier. Yes, I can understand the arguments that a lot of people will have that she was underutilized, and that the entire, Mage Academy arc was rushed and should have been way more than it was. I kind of agree, but I think it goes to show the reason people feel that way is because the time we do have with her as a character is well spent, and they are able to pack in a ton of emotional backstory and development in the character of Rella and also Juno when we get to her, but specifically in that scene with Rella very quickly. And I think they do such an effective job at that, it makes a lot of people wish we had even more time with her, because I think if we had more time with her, she would have been an S tier, if not my favorite antagonist in the entire game. She has this tragic but beautiful ending alongside a really tough as nails boss fight that I'm sure angered quite a few people out there, reading some of my comments, but I think Rella does a great job at just showing how cruel and manipulative this world of Uchronia, well, the country of Uchronia, but the world of Metaphor Refantazio, how cruel and manipulative it can be, and how sometimes people can be forced to do evil things to protect the ones they love, at the behest of evil people. I think Rella does a great job at telling that story. The only thing keeping her out of S tier for me is, yeah, that part of the game was rushed. It's one of the weakest elements of Metaphor Refantazio while also being one of the strongest for me. And it's weird to kind of say that because it sounds hypocritical and it sounds contradictory, but yeah, I love that scene so much, and it does such a great job at really rounding out that entire story arc, bringing all those threads together in a cohesive whole that makes sense to me and is also highly enjoyable and is memorable, but it's so good that it's over so quickly. I wish we had a bit more with it. And now we get to, in my opinion, the big important characters for Metaphor Refantazio, and it is from this point out, we do not have a character below A tier. Buckle up. We're about to glaze some characters. Okay, look, I know I just said that, and I know it was kind of a bit throughout my entire stream and short series so far with this game of me just crapping on Fidelio, mainly because I just like it. Whenever we play games on stream, I like roasting characters that try and roast us, and giving that energy right back. It's just something I find fun. Fidelio as a character, and I'm going to also rank Basilio here. I'm going to put Basilio in S tier, Fidelio in A. And the reason I'm going to do this is because it's kind of how it was intended to be from Atlus, in my opinion. Fidelio and Basilio are like a package deal. Without the other, these characters would be in C tier for me. But it's because they both work together. They both further their storyline. The Magnus brothers work so well because they have each other. Not just in terms of in-lore reasons, but also as characters and as storylines, they work so well because they have each other. They start off not trusting us as the player and our entire crew, but eventually warm up to us. And while there are ups and down moments, eventually they come, at the end of it all, to our way of thinking. They stand behind their ideals, and they're fun. And I think the genius behind their writing is that they felt like party members in all but gameplay for a large chunk of this game. For that entire Virga Island story arc, having Basilio and Fidelio tag along with us does a lot for those characters, because when we get to Basilio and when he is introduced as a party member, we already have all this backstory and all this development for both of these characters. We have the tragic death of Fidelio at the hands of Luis, when he fired his laser shoop-da-whoop right through his heart. It's sad and it's tragic because we had all this time and development with these characters up to that point, so when Basilio is brought into the game as a final party member for us, we don't suffer from what we suffer in a lot of the Persona games, where a character comes online near the end of the game, and we just don't feel as if we had enough time and development for that character to truly care about them on the level of all the other playable characters. That is not the case for me, at least, when it comes to Basilio, because we had all that time, all that effort, all that energy already done for these characters, and it propels both of them up. They lift each other up, and the reason I put Basilio in S is because he's the character we actually get as a party member. If their roles were swapped, their placing here would also swap. But the development we get with Basilio at the end of the game, trying to live in a way to make Fidelio proud, but also to live his own life, is great development in my opinion. And sure, he has one of my weakest follower storylines in the entire game, but it's everything else that keeps him in S tier in my opinion. And now for Dear Maria, Count Me In! A tier. She's a bundle of sunshine. Her follower story does a great job at showcasing the problems the common people face when it comes to the world of Metaphor Refantazio. I never found her annoying. Her storyline is so wholesome. Watching her react to the death of Grius and us maybe not making it back is like really sad and tragic. And there was just a giant smile on my face when we brought Maria with us at the very end of the game onto our next adventure. That was just a feels-good moment, and I'm glad the game was able to have a moment like that. There's no real deep character analysis I particularly want to give about Maria. She's just a joy to have on screen, and I love that finale we have with her of bringing her along onto our next adventure. It's so wholesome. Nothing wrong with a bit of wholesomeness. Now for the guy that gets me unreasonably hyped. I love Nirus, and the reason he's an S and not A is for that one scene where he got the gauntlet runner to fly. The energy his voice actor brought into that scene, him shouting out, "Take that world, I did it." Man chased his dreams to fly beyond the sky and managed to accomplish it. Love it. Love that character. I love big dreamers. I love characters that are able to accomplish their big dream. Nirus fits that archetype perfectly. Also has a really unique follower story with going to find all the little doodads throughout the dungeons. He's so much fun and a great character to juxtapose alongside the other main party members. Love him as a character, S tier. The Prince himself. I may have spoke too soon when I said there wasn't a character that was going to be below A. There's an argument to be made that the Prince and Jay Makoto should be like the same slot here. So here's the disclaimer I'm gonna make for this. When we as the character and we as the player gain the white hair and become the Prince and we like do the DBZ fusion in the Elder Forest, I'm going to count all of that and afterwards as Jay Makoto, as the protagonist. Up to that point for the Prince, I do think he's like solidly fine. He doesn't move the needle. I never particularly viewed him as strong motivation because we never had many scenes with him. We had a couple of flashbacks which were fine, don't get me wrong, that's what keeps him out of C tier for me. But like even when he woke up and sacrificed himself against Zorba, we didn't see that. And I think that's a scene that if we had actually saw, that would have maybe propelled him up to A tier. But without that, I'm going to put him in a high B. And now for the creme de la creme. I think Gallica is easily my favorite Atlus main companion. Unless we count Aegis from Persona 3. The only thing that's going to keep her out of S. See, I'm debating this in my head as I'm doing this right now. I was going to say the only thing to keep her out of S tier is that I think her follower story is kind of mid and really rushed and just too short. I wish we had more scenes one-on-one between Jay Makoto and Gallica, and we just kind of didn't. And the moments that we actually progressed her follower just felt way too quick and rushed. Having said that, sometimes enjoyability is just more important than anything else. And sometimes enjoyability is just more important. When I look back on the character of Gallica, now that some months have passed since I beat the game, she's still one of my favorite characters. When I think of Metaphor Refantazio, I think of Gallica. She's one of the first characters. And when all the dust has been settled, I think she remains one of my favorite characters in all of Metaphor Refantazio. She has a great dynamic with Jay Makoto. I never found her annoying. I liked how she contributed to certain boss fights and actually felt impactful during those moments, like when we first fought Zorba in the first main dungeon. She has a great friendship with the MC. She's just a great, lovable character, S tier. And like, what can I say about these last characters? Luis is one of my favorite antagonists Atlus has ever made. He's right there alongside the final boss of Persona 5 Royal for me. I love Luis as a character. I love his motivations. I love all the plot twists we had with him, that his horns were fake and that he was Elder the entire time. He has by far the best drip in the entire game, and it's not close. His outfit is elite compared to the trash a lot of these characters have equipped. When Luis was on the screen, you never forgot about him. He had gravity to him. He had sway. Great dialogue. This dude was borderline a poet throughout this entire game. Most of my favorite lines of dialogue come from Luis. "Your fool of a king is dead." Man packs in so much meaning in few words, and they're effective. And then the crew of Metaphor Refantazio, some of my favorite characters of any JRPG that I've ever played. Stroll is a phenomenal, main boy for the protagonist. He has one of my favorite voice acting performances in the entire game. He has a great awakening. They all have great awakenings. Legitimately, when in stream people try and ask me to rank the awakenings in Metaphor Refantazio, I struggle because I love them all. It's really hard to put one or the other above each other for me. However, I think Hulkenberg Hulkenberg's might be my favorite. I love how she is ride or die. Ride or die characters, especially for the protagonist, are normally some of my favorite. Hulkenberg is a great example of that. I really enjoyed her follower story. She was one of the characters I utilized the most throughout Metaphor Refantazio. She was super fun to utilize. I loved the knight archetypes. They looked so dang cool. Like Guy the Fierce Knight on steroids. She's just easily one of my favorite characters in the game, but also one of my favorite party members. I think maybe this will be a hot take of like the main party members. Heismay is like my least favorite. I rarely ever utilized him. I know he's busted with Royal Thief. I understand that. I get it. I loved his character introduction. I love that entire story he had, and he's really sad about it. Having said that, now bear with me on this point. I understand this is about to sound really cruel. The dude would not shut up about his dead son, and I think like because of that, it's a little overdone for me. Like they really beat you on the head with a hammer in regards to him and his son. Like dude finds a way to work that into like every conversation. It's a good story, do not get me wrong, but I don't think he's one of my favorite characters, and it might be because of that. Okay, let's not even like try and drum up as if this is gonna be any kind of controversy, right? We all understand these three are in S tier. This doesn't come as a surprise to anyone, correct? I know there are wars that are waged between who's the better character, Juna or Yuffie. I cannot decide. I love them both equally. They're two of my favorite characters in the entire game. The entire Virga's storyline with Yuffie and her going on her entire Final Fantasy X character arc as a summoner going to be sacrificed. I mean, come on. One of the best stories in this game. I love Juna as a character. Her entire reveal, all the scenes she had with the protagonist, her awakening, that entire scene, that entire arc, on top of all the stuff we had just talked about with Rella before. And then what can I say about, you know, Jay Makoto? Our boy. I loved how he just not even randomly, he just like straight up stabbed Luis with the spear in that one scene above the opera house. It felt so dang good. His transformation into being the prince proper near the end of the game was great as well. I think he's one of the best protagonists Atlus has, in my opinion. And it's a style of protagonist that I like way more than just the stereotypical silent protagonist. I liked having him speak. I liked having him be an active character. While he was still mostly quiet for a lot of the game, God, do I wish he had a different outfit. I loved his storyline with the prince. I loved his dynamics with all the other characters in this entire game. He was a great joy to be able to view this game through his lens. I think this is one of the reasons I love Metaphor Refantazio so much, is because on the whole, the important characters and the characters they had to get right, I loved. Remember, B tier still means good, and C is like fine. There's no character in this game where I'm just like, oh god, can we please get this character away already? They all have great storylines, and they all make each other better. It's a sign of good writing. I think Metaphor Refantazio, despite its flaws, has incredible pacing and execution for the most part. Couple bumps and bruises here and there, but as a collective sum and whole, it was a fantastic fantasy to experience. I hope Metaphor Refantazio is a sign of things to come for Atlus. I hope Atlus continues to experiment with this IP and not even necessarily do more things with these characters, but I want more stories like this. I think Metaphor Refantazio is probably my favorite overall constructed game Atlus has made and that I've played. So here's where you all come in. This is my tier list. What's yours? Are there any big disagreements? Who's your favorite character in Metaphor Refantazio, and who's your least favorite? I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. I'm gonna call it there for the day though. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video and you want to see more content. I know I would appreciate it. Bye bye everybody. Go play some video games until we meet again.